My name is Terry, and I am 62 years old. I was standing in my kitchen stirring a pot of homemade chicken soup when my entire world changed forever. The warm aroma filled my cozy three-bedroom home in Denver, and I felt that familiar contentment that comes from preparing something special for the people you love most. My daughter Sarah had just called to confirm dinner plans for the weekend, and we had said our goodbyes. But as I reached for the salt, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Her voice was still coming through the phone. She had forgotten to hang up. And what I heard next would shatter everything I believed about my family. Before I dive into this story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Please hit that like button to show your support, and do not forget to subscribe so you never miss another story. Now let me tell you about the conversation that changed my life completely. Let me paint you a picture of my life before that devastating phone call. After my husband Robert passed away 3 years ago, I thought I had found my new purpose in being the best mother and grandmother I could possibly be. My daughter Sarah, 35 years old, had always been my pride and joy. She married Mark when she was 27, and together they gave me two beautiful grandchildren. Emma, who just turned 12 last month, has these bright green eyes and a smile that reminds me so much of Sarah when she was that age. Then there is Jake, 9 years old, full of energy and always asking me to bake his favorite chocolate chip cookies whenever he visits. Our family routine felt perfect and natural. Every Tuesday I would pick up the kids from school and watch them until Sarah and Mark finished work. Thursdays were our special baking days, where Emma would help me make bread, while Jake mixed cookie dough with flour covering every surface imaginable. Weekends often meant family dinners at my house, where I would spend hours preparing Mark's favorite pot roast or Sarah's beloved lasagna recipe that I learned from my own mother decades ago. Financially, I considered myself fortunate. Robert had been a careful planner, and between his life insurance, our paid-off mortgage, and my modest pension from 30 years of teaching elementary school, I lived comfortably. The house we bought in 1978 had appreciated significantly over the years, sitting in what had become one of Denver's more desirable neighborhoods. I never worried about money, and I was always happy to help my family when they needed it. Just last year, I helped Sarah and Mark with a down payment for their new car when their old one finally gave up. When Emma wanted to take piano lessons, I was thrilled to pay for them. Christmas and birthdays meant generous gifts for everyone, and I never thought twice about spending money to see my family happy. I felt useful, needed, and most importantly, deeply loved. Every family photo on my mantelpiece told the story of what I believed was a close, caring family unit that would always be there for each other. The house felt warm and alive during those family gatherings. Sarah would curl up on the same sofa where she used to do homework as a teenager, while Mark would help Jake build elaborate Lego creations on the living room carpet. These moments filled my heart with such joy that I never questioned whether the love I felt was truly reciprocated. Looking back now, I realize I was so focused on giving and caring that I never stopped to examine what I was receiving in return. The moment I realized Sarah's phone was still connected, my first instinct was to call out and let her know, but something in the tone of her voice made me pause and listen instead. She was talking to Mark, and they clearly believed their conversation was private. What I heard made my hands start trembling so badly that I had to set down my wooden spoon. I am so tired of having to go over there all the time. Sarah was saying, her voice carrying a frustration I had never heard before when she spoke about me. It is like she expects us to revolve our entire lives around her schedule. Every week it is something. Dinner here, help with this, come see that. I feel like I cannot breathe sometimes. Mark's response cut even deeper. I know exactly what you mean. And honestly, Sarah, we need to start thinking practically here. Your mom is sitting on a gold mine with that house. Do you realize what property values are in that neighborhood now? We are talking serious money, and she is just rattling around in there all by herself. My heart began racing as I pressed the phone closer to my ear. This could not be my daughter and son-in-law talking about me like I was some kind of burden or investment opportunity. These were the same people who hugged me goodbye just hours ago, who told me they loved me, who made plans to bring the kids over this weekend. I have been thinking about that too, Sarah continued, and her voice had taken on a calculating tone that I had never heard before. She does not really need all that space anymore. And honestly, Mark, she is getting older. How long before she needs more help than we can give her? Maybe it would be better for everyone if she was somewhere with professional care. The word professional care hit me like a physical blow. They were talking about putting me in a nursing home. At 62 years old, when I was perfectly healthy and independent, I could still drive, cook clean, manage my own finances, and take care of myself completely. Yet here was my own daughter discussing my future, as if I was already incapacitated. "Have you looked into any places?" Mark asked, and I could hear the interest in his voice. "Because I was thinking if we're going to do this, we should probably start researching our options. And Sarah, we need to be smart about this. The sooner we act, the better position we will be in financially." My legs felt weak, and I had to sit down at my kitchen table. The same table where we had shared countless meals, where I had helped Emma with her homework just last week, where Jake had proudly shown me his latest art project. Now I was sitting here listening to my daughter and her husband plot my future without any consideration for what I wanted or needed. The conversation continued for several more minutes, with them discussing different facilities and costs. They were shopping for the cheapest option they could find, treating my well-being like a budget line item. When the call finally ended with the actual click of Sarah hanging up, I sat in my kitchen in complete silence, the chicken soup still simmering on the stove, trying to process what I had just heard. The warm, loving home I thought I lived in suddenly felt cold and foreign, like I was seeing it all for the first time. The days following that overheard conversation felt like living in an alternate reality. Every interaction with Sarah became a performance where I watched for signs of the daughter I thought I knew versus the person I had heard on the phone. The change in her behavior once I knew what to look for was startling and heartbreaking. Sarah's phone calls, which used to be frequent and warm, became shorter and more infrequent. When she did call, there was always an excuse. Work was particularly demanding this week. Mark had been putting in extra hours. The kids had more activities than usual. Each explanation sounded reasonable on its own, but together they painted a picture of someone trying to distance herself from me. When she did visit, the atmosphere felt completely different. Sarah would check her phone constantly, glance at her watch every few minutes, and find reasons to cut visits short. The easy conversation we used to enjoy was replaced by stilted small talk. She would ask about my health with what I now recognized as a strange intensity, pressing for details about any aches, pains, or moments of forgetfulness. "Mum, are you sure you are eating properly?" she would ask, studying my face as if looking for signs of decline. "You seem a little tired lately. Maybe you should see Dr. Patterson for a checkup." Mark's transformation was even more obvious. The man who used to hug me warmly when he arrived now barely made eye contact. He would stand near the door during visits, keys jingling in his pocket, clearly eager to leave. When I offered him coffee or tried to engage him in conversation about his work, his responses were polite but distant. The easy relationship we had built over 8 years of marriage to my daughter had seemingly evaporated overnight. Most painful of all was the change in how often I saw my grandchildren. Emma and Jake, who used to spend Tuesday afternoons with me religiously, suddenly had conflicting schedules. Piano practice ran late, soccer practice started early, playdates with friends became priority over time with Grandma. When I did see them, Sarah seemed to hover nearby, as if monitoring our interactions. I began to notice Mark and Sarah having whispered conversations that would stop abruptly when I entered the room. They would exchange meaningful looks across my dinner table, silent communications that clearly involved me but excluded me completely. The paranoia was almost as painful as the actual betrayal, making me question every glance, every pause in conversation, and every early departure. During those long evenings alone in my house, I found myself replaying years of family memories, wondering how much of what I had interpreted as love and closeness had actually been obligation and convenience. Had Sarah ever genuinely enjoyed our time together, or had she always been counting the minutes until she could leave? When Mark complimented my cooking, was he being sincere, or was he simply being polite to the woman who might leave them an inheritance someday? The isolation was crushing. I had built my entire post-retirement life around being available for my family, and now I was discovering that my availability might have been seen as neediness rather than love. Friends from my teaching days had moved away or passed on, and I had turned down social opportunities because family always came first. Now I was beginning to understand the true cost of that decision. Sleep became elusive as I lay awake wondering when the next shoe would drop. How long had they been planning this? Were they waiting for some specific trigger, or were they simply building their case, gradually? Every time the phone rang, I wondered if this would be the call where Sarah would announce their decision about my future, presented as concern for my welfare, rather than the financial calculation I now knew it to be. 2 weeks after the first overheard conversation, Sarah made another call that she failed to properly end. This time, the oversight would reveal the full scope of their plan, and I would learn just how little my feelings and preferences mattered in their calculations. I was folding laundry in my bedroom when I heard voices coming from my phone again. This time, Sarah was not just talking to Mark. I could hear a third voice that I recognized immediately as my son David, Sarah's older brother, who lived across town with his wife Jennifer and their twin boys. "David, thank God you are here," Sarah was saying. "Mark and I have been talking about this for months, and we really need your input. Mum cannot keep living alone in that big house. It is not safe, and frankly, it is not practical for any of us." My heart sank as I realized this conversation was taking place at my own kitchen table. They had met at my house while I was at my weekly grocery shopping trip, using my home as their private meeting space to plan my future without my knowledge or consent. David's voice was more hesitant than his sister's. "Sarah, I hear what you are saying, but Mum seems pretty capable to me. She drives fine. She keeps the house clean. She manages her finances. What exactly are we solving here?" "David, you do not see her every week like we do," Mark interjected with an authority that made my blood boil. "She is starting to repeat stories. Last week she asked me the same question twice in one conversation. And have you seen how she struggles with the remote control for the new television technology is passing her by?" I wanted to scream. The story repetition happened once because Mark had clearly not been listening the first time I spoke. And the television remote was confusing because they had bought me some complicated universal remote for Christmas that had 40 buttons when all I needed were power volume and channel controls. Sarah jumped back in with what sounded like a rehearsed argument. "Plus, David, we need to think about the financial reality here. Mum's house is worth at least $400,000 now, probably more. That money could pay for really good care for her, and there would still be plenty left for the kids' college funds and our own retirement planning." The casual way she discussed liquidating my life's investment made me feel physically sick. This was not concern for my well-being. This was a business transaction with me as the unwilling commodity. "I have been researching facilities," Sarah continued, "and there are some really nice places about 30 minutes outside of town. Much cheaper than the ones in the city, but still clean and safe. We could visit regularly, and she would have professional staff available 24 hours a day." David asked the question I was hoping someone would ask. Have you talked to Mom about any of this? What does she think about the idea of moving? Mark laughed, and it was not a kind sound. David, you know your mother. She would fight this tooth and nail, even if it was clearly the best thing for her. She is too stubborn to see reason. We need to present this as a fait accompli, not a discussion. Exactly, Sarah agreed. I was thinking we could start by getting her to see Dr. Patterson for a comprehensive physical and mental evaluation. If he finds anything at all, we can use that as justification. And if he does not well, we can probably find a doctor who will be more cooperative. The conspiracy was more elaborate and callous than I could have imagined. They were not just planning to override my wishes. They were planning to potentially fabricate medical reasons to justify their decision. The betrayal felt complete and devastating. David's voice showed more concern now. Sarah, this feels really manipulative. What if we just tried talking to her honestly, explained our concerns, and saw how she responded? David, you are being naive, Mark said with obvious irritation. Your mother controls significant assets, and she is going to become more and more expensive to care for as she ages. We can either manage this transition thoughtfully now, or we can wait until there is a crisis and end up with much fewer options and much more stress. Mark is right, Sarah added. And David, I need to know if you are on board with this or not, because if you are not going to support this decision, Mark and I will have to consider legal guardianship options. I have already spoken to a lawyer about what that would involve. The threat was clear and chilling. Get on board with their plan or be cut out of the financial benefits entirely. David was silent for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was smaller and defeated. Okay, Sarah, if you really think this is necessary, I will support whatever you decide. But I think we should try to make this as easy on Mum as possible. Of course, Sarah said, but I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. We all love her. That is why we want what is best for her, even if she cannot see it herself. As I stood in my bedroom holding that phone, listening to my children plot against me with such calculated coldness, I felt something break inside my chest. These were not the children I had raised, the people I had sacrificed for the family I had built my entire identity around. They were strangers who happened to share my DNA and who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle between them and my assets. I spent 3 sleepless nights deciding how to handle what I had learned. Part of me wanted to pretend I had never heard those conversations, to go back to the comfortable illusion of being a beloved mother and grandmother. But a stronger part of me knew that I deserved better than to live the rest of my life as someone's unwilling victim. When Sarah called on Thursday morning to suggest a family dinner that weekend, her voice carrying the false warmth I now recognized as manipulation, I knew the time had come to confront the truth head-on. Mum, I was thinking we could all come over Sunday afternoon, she said. I could bring a nice roast, and maybe we could have a family meeting about some important things. There are some decisions we need to make together about your future. The word together made me want to laugh bitterly. There was nothing together about decisions that had already been made without my input or knowledge. But I agreed to the dinner, knowing it would likely be my last chance to face them before they moved forward with their plan. Sunday arrived with an unusually grey and cold October afternoon. Sarah, Mark, and David arrived together, which struck me as odd, since David usually came separately with his own family. Jennifer and the twins were notably absent, as were Emma and Jake. This was clearly meant to be an adults-only conversation. Sarah had indeed brought a roast, and she busied herself in my kitchen with a nervous energy that I had never seen before. Mark and David sat in my living room, making awkward small talk about the weather and football scores. The atmosphere was tense and artificial, like actors who had not quite memorized their lines for a difficult scene. During dinner, Sarah kept steering the conversation toward my health and my daily routines. How was I sleeping? Was I taking my vitamins? Had I been feeling confused about anything lately? Each question felt like a trap, and I answered carefully, maintaining my composure while my anger built steadily. Finally, as I was serving coffee and the slice of apple pie I had baked that morning, Sarah exchanged a look with Mark and took a deep breath. Mum, there is something important we need to discuss with you. We have all been talking, and we are really concerned about you living alone in this big house. We think it might be time to consider some other living arrangements that would be safer and better for everyone involved. I set down the coffee pot very carefully and looked directly at my daughter. What kind of other living arrangements, Sarah? Mark jumped in before Sarah could respond, his tone patronizing in a way that made my skin crawl. Terry, we have been researching some really wonderful senior communities, places where you would have your own space, but also access to help when you need it. Professional staff, organized activities, people your own age to socialize with. You mean a nursing home? I said quietly. Well, that is a very old-fashioned way to think about it, Sarah said quickly. These are modern assisted living facilities, much more like apartments than institutions. And Mum, the truth is we are all getting older ourselves. We have our own families to think about, our own futures to plan for. David had remained silent through this exchange, staring at his coffee cup with obvious discomfort. When I looked at him directly, he finally met my eyes. David, is this something you support? I asked him. He cleared his throat nervously. Mum, I just want what is best for you. And if Sarah and Mark think this would be safer... Stop, I said, standing up from my chair. All three of them looked startled, as if they had not expected any resistance to their carefully planned presentation. Just stop with the lies and the manipulation. I know exactly what this is about. Sarah's face went pale. Mum, what do you mean? I mean, I heard your phone conversations, Sarah. Both of them. I heard every word of your planning sessions, your financial calculations, your discussions about finding doctors who would be more cooperative. I heard Mark talk about my house as a gold mine. I heard you threaten David with legal guardianship if he did not cooperate with your scheme. The silence that followed was deafening. Mark was the first to recover, and his response revealed the true nature of the man I had welcomed into my family. Terry, you clearly misunderstood what you heard. We are trying to help you here. And frankly, eavesdropping on private conversations is not exactly normal behavior for someone who is thinking clearly. Do not you dare try to gaslight me, I said, my voice rising for the first time. I heard everything. I heard you shopping for the cheapest facility you could find. I heard you discussing how to override my wishes and present this as a fait accompli. I heard you reduce my entire life to a balance sheet. Sarah finally found her voice, and the mask of caring concern slipped completely away. Fine, Mum. You want the truth? Here it is. You are getting older, whether you want to admit it or not. This house is too big for you, too expensive to maintain, and frankly too valuable to sit empty most of the time while you rattle around feeling sorry for yourself. Sarah, David said sharply, but she ignored him. No, David. She wants honesty. Here is honesty. We all have mortgages, college funds to build our own retirement to worry about. Mum's sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity, while the rest of us struggle with normal life expenses. And yes, she is going to need care eventually. Better to plan for that now while we can make good financial decisions than wait until there is a crisis. The daughter I thought I knew had completely disappeared, replaced by this calculating stranger who saw my life as nothing more than an inconvenience to be managed efficiently. Mark stood up, clearly angry that their plan had been exposed. You know what, Terry? You can be as offended as you want, But this is happening whether you like it or not. Sarah has power of attorney, and if necessary, we will use it. That was when I realized the full scope of their betrayal. The power of attorney Sarah had asked me to sign 2 years ago, presented as a simple precaution in case of emergency, was actually the legal weapon they planned to use against me. But as I looked at these three people who had once been my family, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt and shock were transforming into something much stronger and more focused. I was not the helpless victim they thought I was, and I was certainly not going to go quietly into their convenient solution. "Get out," I said quietly. "All of you, get out of my house right now." "Mom, don not be ridiculous," Sarah started, but I cut her off. "Get out," I shouted, and the force of my own voice surprised me. "This is my house, my life and my decision, and I am deciding that I never want to see any of you again." The silence that followed my demand was electric with tension and shock. For a moment, none of them moved as if they could not quite believe that I was capable of standing up to their carefully orchestrated plan. Then Mark made a critical mistake that revealed exactly what kind of man he really was. "You are being completely unreasonable, Terry," he said, stepping closer to me in what felt like an intimidating gesture. "This is exactly the kind of irrational behavior that proves you need professional supervision. No competent adult would turn down help from their own family." "Help," I laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. "You call plotting behind my back, planning to steal my home, and threatening me with fake medical evaluations help, Mark? You are either delusional or you think I am stupid." Sarah tried a different approach, switching to the wounded daughter routine. "Mum, how can you say we are trying to steal from you? We are your children. Everything we do is out of love and concern for your well-being." "Love." The word felt bitter in my mouth. "Sarah, in the past month, I have heard you complain about having to visit me, watched you calculate the value of my house like a real estate appraiser, and listened to you threaten your own brother into compliance. If that is your definition of love, then I want no part of it." David finally stood up, his face flushed with what looked like shame. "Mum, maybe we approached this wrong. Maybe we should have talked to you first, been more honest about our concerns." "David, you had your chance to be honest," I replied. "Instead, you let your sister and her husband bully you into a conspiracy against your own mother. The time for conversation has passed." Mark made his final miscalculation, then revealing the entitled mentality that had probably driven this entire scheme. "Fine, Terry, but you should understand that if you do not cooperate with this voluntarily, we have legal options. Sarah has power of attorney, and frankly, your behavior right now is not helping your case for competency." That threat was the last straw. I walked to my kitchen and picked up my phone, dialing 911, with my finger hovering over the call button. "You have exactly 60 seconds to get out of my house before I call the police and have you removed for trespassing and elder abuse," I said calmly. "And Mark, if you ever threaten me again, I will not hesitate to pursue charges." The change in their demeanor was immediate and telling. Mark stepped back quickly, suddenly aware that he had crossed a legal line. Sarah's face went white as she realized the potential consequences of their threats being documented by law enforcement. David just looked defeated and ashamed. "You are making a huge mistake, Mum," Sarah said as she gathered her purse. "We were trying to help you, and now you are going to be all alone with no one to take care of you. I would rather be alone than surrounded by people who see me as nothing more than a financial opportunity," I replied. "And Sarah, I want you to know that I am not the helpless old woman you think I am. You're about to find out exactly how capable I still am." As they filed out of my house, Mark turned back one more time. "This is not over, Terry. That power of attorney is still valid, And frankly, this conversation has given us everything we need to prove you are not capable of making rational decisions about your own care. I smiled then, and it was not a kind expression. Mark, you just threatened an elderly woman in front of witnesses after being caught in a conspiracy to defraud her of her assets and freedom. Please, by all means, try to use that in court. I think you will find that judges take a very dim view of adult children who try to manipulate their parents for financial gain. After they left, I stood in my living room surrounded by the remnants of what I had thought was a family dinner. The apple pie I had baked with such care sat untouched on the table, a symbol of the love and effort that I had wasted on people who did not deserve it. But instead of collapsing into grief or self-pity, I felt something I had not experienced in years: pure, focused determination. Sarah and Mark had made a crucial error in underestimating me. They saw a lonely widow who could be easily manipulated and controlled. What they failed to realize was that I was a woman who had raised 2 children, managed a household, taught hundreds of students, and survived the loss of my life partner. I was far from helpless, and I was about to prove it. The first call I made was to my attorney Richard Chen, who had handled Robert's estate. The second call was to my bank. The third call was to a locksmith. By the time the sun set that evening, I had begun the process of reclaiming my life and protecting myself from the people who had betrayed me so thoroughly. As I sat in my newly secured house that night, I felt a strange sense of liberation. The family I thought I had been serving and protecting had never really existed. But the life I was about to build for myself, based on my own choices and my own values, was going to be entirely real. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity of purpose I had not felt in years. The locksmith had changed all my locks the night before, and I had spent the evening creating a comprehensive plan to protect myself and reclaim control of my life. My first stop was Richard Chen's law office. Richard had been Robert's attorney for over 20 years, and he knew our family well enough to understand the gravity of what I was telling him. "Terry, I have to say I am shocked," he said after I explained the situation. "Sarah always seemed so devoted to you, but unfortunately, this kind of financial elder abuse is more common than people realize, and it often comes from family members." Richard, I need to know exactly what that power of attorney document gives Sarah the authority to do, and I need to know how to revoke it immediately. He pulled my file and reviewed the document I had signed 2 years earlier. The good news is that this is a limited power of attorney that only becomes active if you are declared incompetent by a medical professional. The bad news is that Sarah could potentially shop around for a doctor who might be willing to make that declaration and based on questionable evidence. Then we revoke it completely and create new documents that better protect my interests. Absolutely. We can also add language that specifically requires multiple independent medical opinions before any competency determination can be made. And Terry, given what you have told me about their threats and financial motivations, I strongly recommend that we also make some changes to your will and estate planning. Over the next 2 hours, we restructured my entire estate plan. I reduced Sarah and David's inheritance to small monetary gifts, with the bulk of my estate going to establish an educational foundation in Robert's name. The house would be sold upon my death, with the proceeds funding scholarships for children from low-income families. "I want to be very clear about something, Richard," I said as we finished the paperwork. "I am not doing this out of spite or anger. I am doing this because I now understand that my children see my assets as their inheritance rather than my security. I want my money to go to people who will use it to build better lives, not people who see it as an entitlement." My next stop was the bank, where I moved the majority of my savings into new accounts that only I could access. I also updated all my beneficiary information and removed Sarah as an authorized contact on any of my financial accounts. The bank manager, Janet Miller, had known me for 15 years and was visibly concerned when I explained why I was making these changes. "Mrs. Anderson, are you sure you want to make such dramatic changes? Sometimes family disputes can be resolved with good communication and maybe some family counseling." Janet: "They were not interested in communication when they were plotting behind my back for months. They were not interested in my feelings when they were shopping for the cheapest nursing home they could find. This is not a family dispute. This is a financial crime that I am preventing before it happens." That afternoon, I made one of the most important calls of this entire ordeal. I reached out to Emma and Jake's school and spoke with their guidance counselor about maintaining a relationship with my grandchildren without going through their parents. "Mrs. Anderson, this is a very delicate situation," the counselor explained. "Legally, we cannot circumvent parental authority, but we can facilitate communication if both the children and the grandparent request it, as long as the parents do not specifically forbid it." I learned that I could write letters to the children through the school, and they could respond if they chose to. It was not the close relationship I had hoped to maintain, but it was a way to let them know that I still loved them and would always be available if they needed me. The hardest part of that day was calling my longtime friend, Margaret Walsh, who had been trying to reconnect with me for months. Margaret and I had taught together for 20 years, but I had been so focused on being available for my family that I had let our friendship lapse. "Terry, I am so glad you called," Margaret said when she heard my voice. "I have been worried about you. Every time I invited you to book club or our monthly dinners, you always had family obligations." Margaret: "I owe you an apology and an explanation." I told her everything that had happened, and her response was both comforting and enlightening. "Honey, I have seen this before with other friends our age, adult children who see their parents as resources rather than people. You know what the saddest part is? You have been so busy taking care of everyone else that you forgot to take care of yourself and your own friendships. I know that now. Margaret is that book club still meeting and those monthly dinners. Every second Wednesday for book club and the last Friday of each month for dinner. Terry, we would love to have you join us. There are 8 of us now, all retired teachers, and we have the most wonderful time together." For the first time in days, I felt genuinely excited about something. Count me in for both. And Margaret, thank you for not giving up on me. That evening, I sat in my living room with a cup of tea and really looked around my house for the first time in months. Without the constant worry about pleasing my family and being available for their needs, I could see possibilities I had been blind to before. The house was indeed too large for one person, but that did not mean I had to give it up. It meant I could use the space differently. The guest room could become an art studio. The formal dining room could be converted into a library and reading nook. The large backyard could become the vegetable garden I had always wanted, but never had time to plant. More importantly, I realized that I had been living my life as if my only value was what I could provide for other people. At 62 years old, I still had potentially 20 or more years of life ahead of me. Years that I could fill with my own interests, my own relationships, and my own adventures. As I prepared for bed that night, in my newly secured home, I felt something I had not experienced since Robert's death: anticipation for the future. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as Sarah and her family realized that their plan had been completely derailed. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, I fell asleep, feeling like the master of my own destiny. 6 months have passed since that terrible family dinner, and my life has transformed in ways I never could have imagined. As I sit here in my newly organized home office, writing this story for all of you, I can honestly say that losing my family was the beginning of finding myself. The immediate aftermath was not easy. Sarah made several attempts to contact me, each phone call following a predictable pattern. First came anger and accusations about my irrational behavior. Then came attempts at manipulation with Sarah, claiming that Emma and Jake missed me terribly and did not understand why Grandma would not see them anymore. The most telling call came about 3 weeks after our confrontation, when Sarah finally revealed her true priorities. "Mum, you are being completely unfair to the kids," she said, her voice carrying that familiar tone of false concern. "They want to know why you are not part of their lives anymore, and I do not know what to tell them." "You could try telling them the truth, Sarah, that you and Mark tried to steal my house and put me in a nursing home against my will." "We never tried to steal anything. We were planning for your future care. And frankly, your reaction proved that you are not thinking clearly about your own needs." "Sarah, let me ask you a direct question. If I agreed to move into the assisted living facility, you picked out what would happen to my house." The long pause before her answer told me everything I needed to know. "Well, obviously it would need to be sold to pay for your care. But Mum, any remaining money would be preserved for your future needs and eventually passed on to your family. So you would control the sale, you would control the money, and you would decide how it gets spent." "Mum, that is how power of attorney works. Someone has to make these decisions." "Not anymore, Sarah. I revoked that power of attorney, and I have made my own decisions about my future. Decisions that do not include being manipulated by my own children." That was our last real conversation. Since then, Sarah has made a few half-hearted attempts at reconciliation, but each one has felt more like testing the waters to see if I have changed my mind about my money, rather than genuine remorse for her behavior. The letters I have been able to exchange with Emma and Jake through the school have been both heartbreaking and hopeful. Emma, now 13, wrote to tell me that her parents said I was sick and confused, and that I did not want to see the family anymore. I wrote back honestly, explaining that I was perfectly healthy, but that I had discovered her parents had not been honest with me about their intentions. Jake, at 10 years old, simply wrote, "I miss your cookies, Grandma. Can you mail me some?" His innocent request brought me to tears, but it also reminded me that children often understand love in its purest form. I have been sending both kids care packages through the school, including Jake's favorite chocolate chip cookies and art supplies for Emma, who inherited my love of drawing. My new life has been a revelation. Margaret's book club has become one of my favorite parts of each month. We are currently reading Educated by Tara Westover, and the discussions about family loyalty versus self-preservation have been particularly meaningful for me. The monthly dinners with my teacher friends have reconnected me with women who knew me before I became defined solely by my role as a caretaker. We laugh about classroom disasters from decades past, share recommendations for travel destinations. We want to visit and support each other through the challenges of aging gracefully on our own terms. I have also discovered a talent I never knew I had. The art studio I created in my former guest room has become my sanctuary. I started with simple watercolor landscapes, but I have progressed to oil paintings that capture the changing seasons in my neighborhood. My friend Dorothy, who is also in the book club, convinced me to submit 3 pieces to a local art show for seniors. To my amazement, I sold 2 paintings and received a commission for a third. Most importantly, I have learned to travel. Last month, I took my first solo vacation in 40 years, spending a week in Santa Fe, visiting galleries and taking a pottery class. Next month, Margaret and I are going to New York City to see some Broadway shows and visit the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The house that Sarah and Mark saw as wasted space has become my haven. I have hired a teenage neighbor boy named Alex to help with yard work, and together we have created a vegetable garden that produces more tomatoes, peppers, and herbs than I can possibly use myself. I share the surplus with my book club friends and donate the rest to the local food bank. Financial security, it turns out, is not about hoarding money for inheritance purposes. It is about having the freedom to make choices based on your own values and priorities. I am spending my money on art supplies, travel books, and experiences that bring me joy. The educational foundation I established in Robert's name has already awarded its first scholarships to 3 high school seniors who will be the first in their families to attend college. Do I miss my old family life sometimes? Of course I do. But what I miss is the illusion of closeness, not the reality of being seen as a burden and a bank account. I miss the grandchildren I thought I was helping to raise, not the children who were being taught to see me as an obligation. There are moments, usually late at night, when I wonder if I should have tried harder to forgive Sarah and Mark, to find some middle ground, chipchand, that would have preserved our relationship. But then I remember the casual cruelty in their voices when they discussed my future without caring about my wishes, and I know I made the right choice. The truth is that I am happier now than I have been since Robert died. I wake up each morning excited about the day ahead, rather than wondering what family crisis might require my attention. I make plans based on my own interests, rather than everyone else's schedules. I spend money on things that matter to me, rather than constantly trying to solve other people's financial problems. Most of all, I have learned that being alone is not the same as being lonely. For 3 years after Robert's death, I confused the two concepts and filled the emptiness with the wrong kind of relationships. Now I understand that solitude can be chosen and peaceful, while loneliness comes from being surrounded by people who do not really see or value you. If you are watching this story and recognizing yourself in my situation, please know that it is never too late to reclaim your life. You are not required to accept poor treatment from anyone, including family members. Your money, your home, and your future are yours to control, as long as you are mentally competent, regardless of what anyone else thinks would be convenient. And if you are someone who has been taking advantage of an elderly parent or relative, please understand that we are often much more aware of your motivations than you think we are. Respect and genuine care cannot be faked forever, and financial elder abuse is both morally wrong and legally punishable. To my fellow seniors who are watching, remember that this stage of life can be about new beginnings rather than just endings. We have earned the right to make choices based on our own happiness rather than everyone else's expectations. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family loyalty and self-respect? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please share your own stories of standing up for yourself, even when it was hard. Hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences from people who have learned to put their own well-being first. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that it is okay to choose yourself sometimes. Thank you so much for listening to my story with such patience and understanding. I hope that my experience might help someone else recognize their own worth and find the courage to protect it. Remember, you are never too old to start over, and you are never obligated to sacrifice your dignity for someone else's convenience. May you all find the courage to live authentically and surround yourselves only with people who genuinely care about your happiness. Until next time, take care of yourselves because you are worth it.